And welcome back to Achilles Speaks. Today, I wanted to talk about Trump and Republican hypocrisy on a lot of recent issues. And I specifically want to look into issues that the Republican Party and Trump have always said that they champion or they made issues of in the last election, and why they have been hypocritical on these issues as Trump's term has come to fruition. This wasn't originally my plan for this video topic for the week, but recent events kind of pushed me to talk about this because there's a lot of issues that I think and the Republican Party have been completely hypocritical on. Uh, and so, firstly, which is the most salient because it was just yesterday that Trump announced the tariffs that will be going into place across the world. And so, the first issue is the economy. There's so much here. Um, Firstly, these tariffs, if implemented, which the administration so far seems to say that they will be, they say there's no room for negotiation. But we'll see. Trump has walked back tariffs in the past before. There's still a few days before they're supposed to come into effect, although some already have. I believe the 25% tax on foreign automobiles has come into effect, and of course, he has implemented some level of tariffs already in his term. Tariffs are a tax, and the tariffs that he announced would constitute the largest tax increase of my entire lifetime, of our lifetime. We have not seen a tax increase, especially for like low middle class individuals, for the working class. And I don't even know when the last time there was a tax increase even that resembles what would happen if these tariffs are implemented. And tariffs are almost never the answer, especially the level that he's talking about, and especially with the globally ingrained economy that we have. And even JP Morgan today put out a statement that these tariffs could put us dangerously close to recession, if not a recession itself. And I saw another report that said that these tariffs would cost the average American over $2,000 a year. Already today, I've seen two examples of plants being closed. I saw there's a Whirlpool plant in Iowa that was announced to be closing as a result of the tariffs. And then also, I believe there was an automobile company out of Detroit where they have plants in Michigan and Indiana announcing that they will be ceasing operations as a result of the tariffs coming into effect. And let's just make it very clear that these tariffs are implemented on a completely false pretext. Trump says that they're reciprocal discounted tariffs, and he puts these numbers up of tariffs that supposedly these other countries have placed on us because they've supposedly been ripping us off. Those numbers are not tariffs against the US. Those are BS made up numbers. It has to do with the calculation of the trade deficit that we have with these nations, which is not the same as them putting tariffs on us. And also, trade deficits aren't necessarily bad, especially when America overall is the one that has benefited from this global system of free trade the most. Just having a trade deficit essentially means, let's say a country can make something better than us, they have more knowledge, they have the manufacturing base for a certain product. We buy it from them. It's better for us because we don't have those skills, we don't have those certain resources in our country, so we buy it from them. That is technically the amount that we pay for these goods is a deficit. You go to the grocery store, you have a trade deficit with the grocery store because they upcharge for goods, but you're of course not going to be going out foraging for avocados or like something in the wild. Like it's trade deficits aren't inherently bad, they're just a factor of free trade. And that's where those numbers come from. Those numbers are completely made up BS. Those aren't People do not have those levels of tariffs on the US. Nothing even close to that. So let's just make that clear that he's doing this on a completely false pretext, which is no big surprise because he just makes up shit all the time, and basically 30% of the country will not even question it because they just follow whatever he says without any critical thinking of the issue. These will result in price increases. Yes, tariffs could bring back some manufacturing, although that would be very much in the long term, years and years and years. We've spent over 50 years leading and building up the free trade order. The United States has been the center of the free trade global world order. We cannot just reverse that in a day. We cannot just reverse that in a year, not even a couple years. Uh, we made the choice in the past to globalize. That had a lot of negative effects. Manufacturing did decline in the U.S. People lost their jobs. I'm not going to dispute that was a choice that was made that did have very negative consequences. Um, and just to make it clear, it was kind of a both party consensus on that issue. Both Republican and Democratic presidents were supporting globalization. But going back will be more damaging because we've been building up this system for so long now, we can't just go back to what it was before. And I, I'm not convinced that the reason people want to go back to, this manufacturing base that the US once had is just for the sole reason of they want more manufacturing jobs. I think a lot of it has to do with the nostalgia of a lot of these manufacturing jobs back in the day had good pay, good benefits. You could have a family, a stay-at-home mom raising two children, and just the dad goes and works at the factory, and that's enough to provide for the family. That's not possible in America anymore. And to make it clear on that issue, uh, a lot of the reason for why people were paid so well for manufacturing jobs are because of unions. Unions are what built up the middle class in this country for decades during what many would consider America's golden age, kind of between after World War II up until probably the early 70s. I don't think people mourn necessarily the manufacturing job. I think they mourn the good paying jobs. They mourn the financial security, the ability to live the American dream, because that has slipped away. And I'm not convinced if manufacturing jobs came back that that would happen again. And I'm also not convinced that we have the workforce trained or primed to go back to factories. Yes, I'm sure there are quite a few people, perhaps even in the millions, that would be willing to go and work in factories again. But I don't think it's the level of what it used to be. I mean, just like statistically, most Americans come from the cities or the suburbs. And if you go and ask any random suburban kid what they want to do, it is most likely not to go work at a manufacturing plant. That's just not how my generation has been primed to think about the future and our jobs. People mourn the pay, not the job itself, I think. And just because goods are produced outside of America doesn't mean we're not benefiting. American wealth has only grown over decades. American productivity has grown over decades. GDP has grown over decades. Stocks have grown over decades. America has unparalleled economic prosperity. The issue is that the workers have not been sharing in this prosperity, so Americans feel like they need to go back to a different era when you could have lived the American dream. But because of greed and the monopolization of multiple industries, that's just not possible anymore. And that is the root cause of these issues. It is not free trade at this point. While yes, I do agree in the past it did have a very destabilizing effect on the economy, but we've transitioned mostly. And transitioning back now, I just don't think is feasible. And it is going to crash the economy if this actually goes into effect. Americans will be paying more if this goes into effect. And it is just so ironic because Trump talked about the entire campaign about lowering prices. On day one, I'm going to lower prices. That hasn't happened. And I think it's really unfortunate because, I mean, I could tell very clearly that he just BS spewing out of his mouth. And a lot of Americans also knew. But I think he's used kind of this feel of like, oh, I'm a former businessman, not a politician, and so trust me on this. And then he just says random shit. He at this point he is a politician. He is a billionaire politician, and he lied, and he lied, and he lied, and he lied. And it's just really unfortunate that a lot of people bought into it. That just because he says it loudly that he's going to lower prices, just because he says it every day, doesn't mean he's actually going to do it. And we're seeing that now, and we will continue to be seeing it into the future. And the Republican Party that stands behind him on this issue is also complicit. And so I mentioned Trump specifically a lot throughout this video, and I will continue to on the other issues that I address. But also, the Republican Party has been complicit in these issues, and so they're also to blame. They have not pushed back. They have abdicated their responsibility to put a check on the president. Um, and so that's why we are where we are today. And Trump has no idea what he's talking about on this issue. Just because he's a successful businessman, which on a lot of issues he wasn't even that successful, does not mean he knows how to run a country. And that has just been clear and shown time and time again. And so moving on to a different issue, national security. As I'm sure most of y'all have heard about the Signal group chat scandal where war plans were leaked as a reporter was added to an unsecured group chat discussing war plans. If this would have happened during the Biden administration, if this would have happened during the Obama administration, Fox News would have been going 24/7, basically arguing for people to be outside the White House with pitchforks. And I'm really sad that we haven't seen the Democrats or the left hammering on this issue more. Because the Republicans really would have jumped on this, but it also just goes to highlight the hypocrisy on the national security issue. If you think that China or other adversaries of the United States are not tapping into national security members' phones, etc., and not like looking at unsecured text communications, then you have no idea how this works, because that is exactly what they try to do. And it's not that hard to do. Nations do it all the time. The United States has even wiretapped our allies, monitoring their phone communications in the past. It's very doable, especially with the sophistication of like the Chinese intelligence agency. And then it was just revealed recently that it wasn't just that group chat. There are more than 20 of those group chats. So this is just, heads need to roll. These officials need to be gone. And Trump not firing them and Republicans standing by them is damning. And they should be held accountable for this. They cannot claim to be good on national security when they're letting state secrets be just like strewn about so willy-nilly. And it's not even just that. It was also announced in the past week that national security officials have been using private emails and private email servers. Does that ring a bell? Do you remember 2016 when literally months, if not over a year of coverage on Hillary Clinton's emails, private emails, happened? And that's probably a major reason why she was not elected. And now they're just doing it because they know they can just do anything and the base will just go along with it and somehow rationalize how that squares with reality or a made-up sense of logic when it doesn't. Let's be adults. Let's be rational thinking people, because rational thinking has just been thrown out the window in this administration. The adults are not in the room. That is a phrase that we have heard from them. The adults are now back. Common sense is back. They're idiots. They have no idea what they're doing. Just because they say these things does not make it true. It's not even just these issues that have strong national security concerns. Also, consider partisan firings and hirings at the Department of Defense and the National Security Council. Just today, officials were fired at the National Security Council because Laura Loomer, who is a conspiracy theorist who has peddled conspiracy theories about 9/11 and how that happened, and other wild conspiracy theories. She has the ear of the president. She advocated at the White House with Trump today to fire national security officials because supposedly they were disloyal. I am very skeptical about what that they were actually disloyal and what disloyalty actually means. And the fact that we have such insane, crazy people having this much of a say on national security should be concerning for everyone. And I also mentioned the Department of Defense and Trump firing people at the Joint Chiefs earlier, just over a month ago as his term started. He fired the only woman in the Joint Chiefs, and he fired the only black man in the Joint Chiefs. And he replaced these individuals with less qualified individuals. Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, yes, he has military experience, but he's a Fox News host. And to make it just abundantly clear, Trump has had to sign waivers to allow some of these individuals to come into the top military posts, because if you look at the legal statute itself, they're technically not legally qualified to be holding these positions. And so it's DEI for conservatives, DEI for MAGA. It is efforts that have been blinded by partisan goals, and it makes us weaker, not stronger. They say DEI, DEI, all these things have been happening for DEI. The principle of DEI is not that low quality individuals get hired. It's that if someone applies, let's say a black individual applies, they have the same qualifications, same everything, and a white person applies, same qualifications, same everything. Historically, the white person has always been hired. DEI, when implemented well, means that the black individual should also be looked at and hired at higher rates than what they historically have been. It's not that you have an unqualified person of color applying and a super qualified white person applying, and then the unqualified person gets the job. That is not what has been happening, to be clear. Trump has been lying on this issue. He just says these things, and I don't know why Democrats don't push back more on these false narratives and these lies on these issues, especially when at the DoD, he is putting technically, legally unqualified people to lead the Department of Defense and our national security, and making national security decisions at the hands of wild conspiracy theorists. The Republican Party is standing by and allowing this to happen while national security is being risked, and more so than it has been potentially in my entire lifetime. Um, Moving on to free speech, there's been a lot of talk in recent years about conservatives crying about supposedly not being allowed to speak freely in this country, which I still challenge them to say, what exactly have you not been allowed to say? There are multiple large conservative platforms, Fox News, multiple large podcasts where conservatives are able to say what they want. I have heard so many times, even here at Harvard, I've heard them talk about being silenced, but the fact that I'm hearing them talk about it means that they have a voice and that they're able to be heard, and they just choose their time to make up this narrative and be the victim about not being able to supposedly have free speech. And I still don't fully understand what they feel like they haven't been able to say. Like, are they like, is this whole tirade just because they can't say the N word, like, and not get canceled? I really still don't fully understand this issue. And so Republicans have made this a big issue, and Trump made it an issue during his campaign about bringing back free speech to America, and all these rights have been infringed upon, which is just BS. And so now what we're actually seeing is free speech rights being suppressed under the Trump administration. It seems like a lot of the accusations that Trump and the Republican Party have been making are just confessions, that they're just projecting things. So we've seen a targeting of universities and individuals in an effort to silence free speech, including here at Harvard has been targeted, in other large universities, and again, individuals, including individuals who work at universities. And this has a chilling effect on free speech. And the Trump administration is using anti-Semitism as an excuse to silence free speech. I really don't think most Republicans give a rat's ass about anti-Semitism or really think it's that big of an issue, but they think that it can be a something that they can use as an example for a reason to silence free speech. Just because, I've said this before, and this is just not even like going into personal opinions on this issue, but just because you are pro-Palestine does not mean you are a terrorist or even pro-Hamas. And that's basically what the right has been doing. If you is equivocating those things. Just because Trump or Republicans say that they're supporting terrorists does not make that true. Because a lot of the times their logic has been, oh, they're vocally supporting Palestine. That makes them a terrorist. That's not how this works. That's not how this country works. And that is an attack on free speech. And them targeting these universities with these funding is telling the universities, shut up or else. It's telling people who want to come to this country and do groundbreaking research, to start brand new companies. So many of the Fortune 500 companies of the past decades have been started by foreigners. It's telling people, if you're going to come here, you don't say certain things. In America, apparently now, you can't say whatever you want. You can't speak on certain political issues. You will have repercussions. And this is just a reason to get at free education and free speech because they are unsatisfied with people speaking up against the regime. And people who tend to be more educated tend to be more liberal. That hasn't always been the case, but during the Trump era, that has been the case. And so they view higher education as a threat to their agenda. Um, and so it's been really horrendous to see this. A party which supposedly is supposed to stand up for free speech is actively going after free speech in a way that we have not seen in this country in a long time. And it's not just that, but there's also a crushing of free speech within the Republican Party itself. If you don't kiss the ring, if you speak against Trump, you face the consequences in the Republican Party. This has been the case for a while now, where if a Republican says anything different than what the president likes, they get primaried and they lose. Trump goes after them. Musk has also said that anyone who challenges Trump's agenda, Musk will put his millions, billions of dollars to fund a primary challenge against them. Yes, parties do try to get their members in line with the president, but not this explicitly, not with this vigor, not with this intensity of if you speak out, you won't be in office anymore. If you do this, you're not a member of the Republican Party anymore. So it's really a silencing of certain types of conservative voices as well that we've seen from the MAGA movement in this country. And it's not just free speech, it's also basic rights and the constitutional order that Trump has been attacking. We've seen these disappearances off the streets of plain-clothes individuals with vans coming up and basically just taking people off the streets for supposedly, again, this goes to the issue of supposedly being terrorists or something just because they support Palestine. There's just an example of that happening here close by in Somerville, here in Massachusetts, where apparently, so far publicly, the only thing that we know is she wrote an op-ed. She wrote a piece of political speech a year ago, and that has caused her to be disappeared and deported from this country. She was a Fulbright scholar. She's smarter than I am. Like, I'm not a Fulbright scholar. um, and this logic of, oh, well, first he's using false pretenses of like, she was not supporting terrorism that we know of. There's been no public support of that. She has not been charged with a crime. Um, if you are legitimately supporting terrorism, let's just make this clear. I do think you should be charged, but you also should have to go through due process because people are not being allowed to go through due process. And just because you are an immigrant or a foreigner here on a visa going to school does not mean that you are not entitled to free right due process. The Constitution affords every individual within the United States bounds the rights entitled to them in the Constitution. Just because people who are here on visas, people who are not originally from the US, are being targeted and are not being allowed due process in courts, that doesn't mean that it's just them who are under threat. It's all Americans. Because you have to understand this and listen carefully to what I'm saying. If someone is taken off the street and they are not given due process, they are not given their day in court, how do we know that that's the right person? How do we know that that's not actually an American citizen being targeted? And we have seen at least 2 examples I've heard of the wrong person being shipped out of the country to prison camps in El Salvador or elsewhere when they were not supposed to be sent there because they were not afforded proper due process. If you do not allow everyone due process, then that allows the opportunity for no one to be allowed due process. The administration can take a political dissident, even an American citizen, take them off the street randomly, not give them due process rights, and say, oh, they were Hamas, they were terrorists supporting. This is all just made up BS, and we have a court system for a reason, and we need to go through it. And not only that, but on the case I was talking about earlier of the disappearing of the woman from here in Somerville, there was a court order saying do not take her out of state without at least giving 48 hours notice. They did that. They completely went over the judges, the federal judges' head, and did that. That is completely disrupting the constitutional order in this country. And Trump has now been pushing rhetoric, and other Republicans, such as Speaker Mike Johnson, about impeaching judges just because they rule in ways that the Republicans don't like. Again, this is completely undermining our constitutional order, and the founders would be rolling in their graves. Not only the founders, but traditional conservatives from decades ago would also be rolling in their graves because this is completely antithetical to traditional conservatism. It's completely antithetical to America. It is anti American. Trump is the most un American president I've had in my lifetime, and I have no qualms saying that. I have no doubts in my mind. These are things that happen in North Korea. These are things that happen in third world countries. These are not things that happen in the United States of America. And we cannot call ourselves a free country when we are disappearing people off the street without due process rights. It is just literally I can't even put it into words how psychotic it is that this is being rationalized and supported by this administration and certain individuals because they just go along with it and buy what the administration says about the issue, even though it's completely fabricated BS. We cannot have any legitimacy again in calling ourselves a free nation if we are doing this, even against people who are not American citizens. There we are abdicating our values as a country. This is not what America was founded on. Um, and it goes against everything that the founding fathers wanted. This is the type of stuff that England would do to us when we were colonies. This is the type of stuff that caused our founding fathers to want to rebel against the English. Is this type of thing? No due process, taken off the street. This is just lunacy, and I don't know how it's been rationalized like this. And it's not even these issues. It's also Trump saying that he's not kidding about a third term and kind of peddling this. Just to be very explicit, he can't be president a third term. He also can't be vice president. If you actually look at the Constitution, which a lot of conservatives always like to talk about the Constitution, or at least historically have, if you actually read it, it's not even up to interpretation. It's plain as day. You cannot be vice president if you've served as president twice, 2 terms, and you cannot run for. There's no way. There's no way to go around it unless you just completely break the law, undermine the Constitution, and go against everything that America stands for. Not only that, not only against the values that America stands for, but it is disrespectful to the thousands, hundreds of thousands, perhaps millions of Americans that have fought for this country in wars, in conflicts and battles, who have fought for liberty, who have fought for these basic rights, who have fought for freedom of speech, who have fought for due process, who have fought for an equal 3 branches of government, who have fought for these things. The people who fought in the Civil War fought for this. The people who fought in the Revolutionary War fought for this. The people who fought in World War I fought for this. The people who fought in World War II fought for this. And now we're just throwing it in the garbage, apparently. And Democrats need to be a lot more explicit on this, and we need to be louder, and we need to be more militant on this issue, because these are fundamental rights. And Trump, he can't serve another term. And just to make it very clear how damaging that would be if he tried to do that, I think it would completely undo our constitutional order. I think we would be barreling towards a civil conflict as a country. I think potentially up to a second civil war if he was allowed to run again and somehow won, or if he canceled elections somehow, which I'm not saying he's going to for sure, but the fact that he's teasing it warrants concern. And it's better to be safe than sorry. It's better to just ignore them as offhand jokes, which he said he's not kidding, and be caught off guard and not prepared, rather than actually taking what he's saying and being prepared and hoping for the best that this doesn't actually come to fruition. Um, and I don't even know if I need to bring it up, but I feel like I should. Again, he attempted to overturn the 2020 election, just plain as day. And there was so much investigations into this to where this was a concerted effort to get these fake electors in swing states like Michigan, etc., and overturn the will of the people. This was a well thought out plan. This wasn't just some, oh, we're going to do this. This was thought out in advance and implemented by Trump. That's un American. And frankly, the fact that he hasn't been punished by a judicial system is a damning condemnation of how this has been handled and how justice is handled in this country right now. Because we cannot uphold this constitutional order with such attacks on it. And uh, I just really mourn for this country, and I really just hope that it doesn't go further. We'll have to see what happens. And I also want to go into a bit about American standing in the world and how Trump has talked about in the past. He's used the phrase like countries are laughing at us, the rest of the world is laughing at us. Um, which again, for the most part, is just made up BS. And now, if countries aren't laughing at us now, they're looking at us with fear, and then with wide eyes as we literally abdicate our leadership in the world. We are currently abdicating our leadership in the world with our tariffs, with how we're handling our alliances. You have South Korea and Japan now working with China. Mexico says they're looking elsewhere. Canada, Australia, countries in Europe are saying that our relationships are irreparably changed for the worse, and that they're looking to elsewhere. They're not looking towards the U.S. for guidance or leadership anymore. And it's not just the leaders of these countries. If you look at polls of citizens in these countries, in Europe, for example, if you look at polls of how citizens in these countries, their favorability of the U.S., it has dropped dramatically during Trump's time in office. The majority of citizens in a lot of countries in Europe no longer have a good opinion of the U.S. We have worked so long to build up this US led world order, which has benefited us. We have built ourselves up as a world hegemon, as a world leader, and we are now just willingly giving it up. We are willingly shooting ourselves, not just in the foot, in the chest. We're driving our allies away. And this helps China, it helps our adversaries, it helps other countries um, more. It is not America first. South Korea and Japan are now working with China instead of the U.S. So is Mexico. So are all these other countries. I, I, I really think that in the past couple decades, the claims of American power in decline, these claims were overstated. But I don't think they are anymore. Trump is single handedly ushering us into a Chinese century, a century led by China as the world leader instead of the US. Because how? Our allies are literally telling us they can't trust us anymore. I guess our former allies. They're saying they can't look to us for leadership, they can't trust us. What does America's word, what does it matter in the world now? How can we achieve our goals in the world if no one's willing to work with us? If we have no partners? How can we do this if we're acting so irrationally, so erratically, where people, the rest of the world is literally watching us stab ourselves in the chest with horror, and they think we're literally psychotic for it, and it's rightly so. And I don't know, in the U.S. we're in this information bubble where I think a lot of people are isolated from how the rest of the world actually thinks about us, but this is the case. This is how a lot of at least the West views us right now. They think we're literally crazy, and I think Trump is crazy. And the fact that he's doing this is sad because the world order that we've had since post World War II cost so many lives to build. And it has been one of the most stable eras in world history in terms of conflict, especially in the West. Um, it has ushered in unparalleled stability and prosperity, especially for those in the West. It has been to the Americans, the United States' benefit. And so the issues that we face as a country aren't the things that Trump is saying, like I was saying earlier. I think the issues and why people feel like the system perhaps isn't working doesn't have anything to do with Canada. It doesn't have anything to do with Europe. It has everything to do with greed and monopolization and not paying workers their fair share and not having a proper social safety net in this country and having institutions that are failing and not addressing the concerns of this country. But it's not a result of these issues that Trump is saying. He'll do anything but actually look at or solve the root cause of the issue. And it's no surprise. He's a billionaire himself. He inherited this money. Um, he was born into that lifestyle. He has no idea what the lives like I grew up in are like growing up in a working class family in the Midwest. He has no idea what that's like. He does not have sympathy, no matter how much he claims to have sympathy, or no matter how much he claims to be looking out for the working class. He doesn't give two shits about it. He has his own personal policy agenda and he's pushing it on us. And he's somehow been, and I will give him credit on this, he has been so good at persuasion, so good at the narrative, at controlling the narrative, so good at these things where he's convinced such a large part of the country to abandon values that we once used to agree on and values that we once all used to hold so dearly. And if anyone would have infringed on any of these rights even slightly 10 plus years ago or more, they would have been driven out of office so quick. It makes what Nixon did in office pale in comparison. If um, if Trump was in the office then, he would have been impeached, no doubt about it. He would have been chased out of office. But we've just been slowly moving towards this information ecosystem dominated by Trump and these lies and these false narratives, and the left and the Democratic Party has not been effective at combating these narratives. We need to combat these narratives, and we need to flip the script about how the current Republican Party, I really do not believe, is good at national security. I don't think it's good at the economy. I don't think it's good at free speech rights or basic rights. Um, and it's really sad. It's really sad because these are all things that we should be agreeing on. But here we are. And sorry, this was basically just a long rant, but I needed to get it out. And not every video will probably be like this. I do like more issue specific videos with a little bit less vitriol, but just how things have been going on in the past few weeks has just been driving me insane. Like the gaslighting, everything that has been happening. Um, and so I just really hope that um, we shift course, and because right now we are an empire, we are a nation in decline, um, and there's no doubt about that. And there's no doubt that Trump is accelerating that decline. No matter his claims of supposedly being America first, or no matter his claims of this and that, it's all just BS. Um, so yeah, thank you for listening, and I'll see you again next week.